Hello everyone. Welcome to our discussion on Kenneth Frampton's Modern Architecture, a critical history. Today we'll be diving into chapter 1 titled News from Nowhere, England 1836 to 1924. This chapter looks at the complex interplay between architectural movements, social change, and how these shape the built environment in England during this period. As architecture students, we know that the context in which buildings are made doesn't just shape their design but also reflects the broader shapes in society, politics, and the culture. Frampton explains this by focusing on England, where industrialization, urbanization, and social reform were happening rapidly. Each of us will explain a different aspect of this chapter, as this chapter is divided into three parts. Part 1: The Industrial Revolution and its impact on architecture. So let's dive into the first part of the chapter, which looks at how the Industrial Revolution completely reshaped England's urban fabric. England's cities were growing rapidly, with more people flocking to the urban areas for work, especially in factories. This sudden shift in population dynamics created both opportunities and challenges for the city's architecture and its architects as well. At this time period, we see the rise of utilitarian architecture. Buildings designed not for ornamentation but purely for function. This is exemplified in factories and warehouses that started to dominate city landscapes. The focus here was efficiency and economy of spaces rather than the aesthetical appeal. It's interesting how the very nature of industrial capitalism led to the construction of spaces that were in sense reflection of the time's social and economic priorities, which were mostly speed, proficiency, and the mechanization of life. At the same time, we see a contrast in the architectural world with the Gothic Revival movement, led by figures like Augustus Pugin, an architect, artist, and a critic. The Gothic Revival, which sought to revive medieval aesthetics, had a social and moral purpose. It was tied to the desire to create a new social order based on traditional values, rejecting industrialized, mechanized world for something more aesthetic and spiritual. As we can see, the social movements in this period weren't just about political ideas but were embedded in its architecture as well. For example, its forms, materials, and the way it represents the values of that time.
The arts and crafts movement and social reform. Building on that, another crucial social movement that shaped architecture during this time was the arts and crafts movement. This was, in many ways, a direct reaction to industrialization, which, as we have heard, prioritized mass production and efficiency over quality and craftsmanship. Leaders of the arts and crafts movement, like William Morris and John Ruskin, sought to reconnect architecture with craftsmanship and to counter the dehumanizing aspects of the industrialized world. Frampton explains how this movement was deeply rooted in social reform. The arts and crafts thinkers believed that good design had the power to improve society by encouraging personal engagement with art and craft. The aim was not just to create beautiful buildings, but to create spaces that would inspire a better way of life for the working class. This idea of social architecture was incredibly progressive for its time. It was not just about aesthetics, but about shaping how people would live and interact within their spaces. The movement's ideals found expression in both small domestic architecture and larger civic projects. One of the best known examples is the work of architects like Charles Boise and Edwin Lutyens, who embraced traditional building methods and local materials in an effective craft designs that were not only aesthetically pleasing but also ethically sound. These architects viewed the built environment as a tool for social change, illustrating that architecture was as much as about values as it was about design.
The rise of modernism and its social implications. Now let's fast forward to the rise of modernism, which Frampton addresses towards the end of the chapter. By the early 20th century, the groundwork laid by earlier movements like the arts and crafts and Gothic revival started to influence a new generation of architects who were pushing for radical change. Modernism, as Frampton highlights, sought to break away from the past entirely. It embraced new technologies and materials such as steel and reinforced concrete and focused on function above all else. But what's really interesting is how modernist architecture was also tied to new social visions. Architects like Le Corbusier and Walter Gropius believed that modern design could radically transform society by creating better living conditions, particularly for the growing working class in the cities. Frampton delves into how modernism, while often viewed as a purely aesthetic movement, was deeply intertwined with the social movements. Modernist architects were interested in creating functional, affordable housing that could improve the lives of people living in overcrowded conditions. The international style and the development of high-rise apartment blocks were seen as solutions to the urban housing crisis that was exacerbated by industrialization. However, while the intentions were social derived, modernism also had its critics. Some argued that the movement lacked rational form and emphasis on function over ornamentation led to buildings that were impersonal and lacked the warmth and human scale found in previous architecture style. This tension between functionality and humanism remains a key issue in architectural discourse today.
We can see how architecture has always been a tool for social change. Whether it's thought the industrialized and utilitarian spaces of factories, the moral and social aims of the arts and crafts movement, or the version of modernism's efficiency and potential for social transformation. All of these movements, in their own ways, were reflections of the ongoing struggle to reshape society in a time of massive change.
In conclusion, Kenneth Fanton's first chapter offers a fascinating look at how architecture in England during the 19th and early 20th centuries was shaped by both technological advancements and social movements. The complex relationship between the rise of industrialization The social reform movements like the arts and crafts movement and the eventually shift towards modernist design all show how architecture was not just about building structures. It was about responding to and reflecting the rapidly changing world. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive into the first chapter of modern architecture, a critical history by Kenneth Frampton. We hope this discussion has helped you